Hey buddies, I hope you're doing well. So in this video, we're going to be going through a response video to Patrice, who requested that we do a video on trig graphs, right? So in this one, I'm going to be covering a lot of notes. I'm going to be putting some notes there before we go into this question. And also, of course, you're going to be allowed to skip through the notes if you feel like you don't need that. You just need to look at the solutions. And also, if you are new to the channel, I would like to welcome you. And if there's anything you need help with, please don't forget to just leave that in the comment. And also, don't forget to subscribe so that you won't miss when these videos gets uploaded. All right, so without wasting any further time, let's first go straight into trig functions. So whenever you think of trig functions, first things that you need to have an understanding with is that most of the questions that you're going to be getting, right, they will require you to use calculator, especially when it comes to sketching. But you also need to have some short or some knowledge of how the trig functions work, right? So we have three types. So I'm just going to write all the three types here so that when I write these, I can just explain how do they work. So let's go ahead and write those ones. All right, so here, as you can see here, I have written all three general formulas for the trig graphs. So we're just going to be going through each and every part as to how it works. So again, remember, this is the part where I'm just sharing the notes. You can skip it, and that is totally fine. You can just jump straight to the part where we're doing the questions. So here, the first thing that you need to understand about these functions is that cos and sine, they are more or less the same things, right? So what do I mean by that? I mean that all these unknowns, A, K, P, and Q, they're basically the same thing. So now here, for example, A, it is an amplitude. So it's the same thing even when you're looking at cos, right? And then K here, it basically gives you a number of periods, right? A number of cycles within a domain 0 to 360. But I'll just say number of cycles, right? Or I'm just writing it as cycles, and I'm just gonna explain it when we're going through the activities. And then P here, it is the horizontal shift, so I'm gonna write it as HS. And then Q here, it is a vertical shift, right? So now when it comes to, so this basically is the same even with cos, so I'm not gonna write much there. So now with the tan graph, the only thing that differs here, it is this value for A, right? So A there is not an amplitude. So here, this value for A, it only gives you an idea of how the shape would look like, given that when A is positive, it should look like this, and then when A is negative, it should look like that. So now here, I would say this is not an amplitude. This does not mean it is an amplitude, so I'm just writing it as not amplitude, and then I'm just going to explain to it as I'm drawing it, because I only get to explain it when you actually see the diagram, right? So K, P, and Q are still the same thing. Now, what is the one thing that you must understand about the trig graphs, right? So one thing that you must understand is how they look like. So firstly here, there are two ways that I'm going to draw here. Dividing that with that line. I'm dividing them with that line there. So the first one, it is the original one. So here, if you have sine and then the value of your amplitude, it is greater than 0, or other words in positive. So it means your shape that you're going to see, if I'm starting the graph from 0, right? If I'm starting the graph from 0, it will go like this, right? And then the shape, if A is negative, it means it will go the other way around. So I'm just gonna write these notes here so that you guys can have an understanding of how they look like. Okay, so now let's do the same thing now for the next one, which is the cos graph. So the cosine graph, if your value it is positive on your Cartesian plane, it should have a shape like that, right? So just extend this a bit, and then if your A is negative, then it should have the shape like this. Now this helps you a lot, especially when it comes to these questions, because once you understand what is happening, once you understand how they look like, you get to see basically, or you get to interpret how everything works, right? Okay, so now here I'm going to do the same thing with 10. So with 10 here, the value for A, I like to explain it with the shape for 10, right? So I like to say that with 10, if A is positive, how it looks like it basically has a shape like this. So I'm just going to draw it here like this and that, and then you see that there's going to be your vertical asymptotes D, right? But then if it happens that it is negative, right, and then it means your shape is going to be the other way around. So that's all that I'll always say that you should take note of when it comes to 10. Basically it is the shape, so it will be like that. Now it's going to be the other way around, given that again that this is your vertical asymptote and your vertical asymptote there. All right, so that is basically how these things work, right? Now one thing that you also, another thing that you should know, it is basically the periods, right? So the period, so I'm just gonna write period here and then explain all of them. So for sine and cos, right, your period will be period is equals to 360 divided by the number of cycles, right? So this will help you to find how long does the shape here, this shape here forms within the certain time. So it gives you the time at which this one cycle will be formed, right? For example, if this is 2, then it means 360 divided by 2 will be 180. Then it means this graph will be from 0 to 180. So that's basically what period states, right? So for 10, it is different. So the period day, it becomes 180 divided by k, right? So it's basically the same is true here. Whatever value that you're going to be getting here, it tells you that this one cycle, this full complete wave or form, this is where it will take, this is how much it will take for it to be formed, right? So I'm just going to be adding all these notes here because I feel like they're going to be important at the later stage. So the value for A, for example, for the amplitude, if you want to calculate an amplitude, it is also something that you need to know how to calculate. You can, looking into a diagram, you can calculate by taking the maximum, subtract the minimum, and then divide that by 2, right? But then now remember this value here, it will always be positive, right? It will always be positive. But then if you're interpreting, judging by how the graph looked, if the graph looked like this, and then for example here your value was 3, then it means here you will then conclude and say A is equals to minus 3, right? So I'm just making an example if it was like this, right? But if it is like that, then you just keep it as 3, right? Okay. So another one formula that you should know, it is for the vertical shift. So Q. So the vertical shift formula, it is basically the maximum plus minimum divided by 2, right? So this then means that if you have this, then the value for Q, if you're looking into a diagram, if you want to spot it, you just need to look at the average, or you need to look at half of the distance that your graph took, right, when it comes to range and domain, right? So if you have if you see that your graph ranges between -1 to 1, right, then it means at the center of that, this is where you will find your value for Q. So in this case, you can see that this is on the x-axis, so it tells me that Q here, it is going to be 0. So the same is true for the next one here, this one with F. You can see that it ranges from here, I will say maybe -1/2 to a half, but then you can see the halfway it is, right? So you can see that in the middle, that's where your value for Q is, and then it means it is also 0. And you can see that basically according to that, based on the equations there. So the last thing, I know this is too much, but it is something that you must take into account before you go to the questions, or this is something that you must know before answering these questions. So another one, it is basically the domain. Sorry, the range, because the domain, you can you will basically find it looking at the graph there, right? So the range for I'm focusing mainly on sine and cos. So the range, it is y is in between, so I'm just going to write it here, y is in between your minimum, so I'm just going to write your minimum and your maximum, right? So if it happens that you don't know what is your minimum and your maximum, let me just open more space here like that. If you don't see your minimum or maximum from the formula, or from the diagram, basically if you're given the formula that you're going to use for the minimum, it will be minus a, right, plus q, and then for the maximum it will be basically positive a plus q. So what does this mean? So this means if, for example, here I have an equation, let's say 3 cos theta. If I want to calculate the maximum, right, I'm going to write this as 3 plus, and then q here is 0, and I'll get 3. But if I want to calculate the minimum, even if this is still positive, I'll just say minus 3 plus 0, then it will be minus 3. So this will mean now my range is between minus 3 and 3. So this is basically what this means. So this is for sine and cos. So let me write this: sine plus cos. So that's basically how it works, right? So if you want to take all these notes, I know that I just said a lot of things there because there's so much that you must understand, but these are the main things that I feel like you must basically have in mind. All right, so now that we have this out of the way, we can just go straight now into answering the question that we've given there. So the question goes as follows here. It says, in the diagram below, the graphs of f of x is equal to half cos x and g of x, which is equal to sine x minus 30, are drawn for the interval x is an element of minus 90 to 240, including minus 90 and 240, right? So if you have these square brackets, it means minus 90 and 240 are also included. Now a and b are the y-intercept of f and g respectively. So now let's go ahead and answer the questions, right? So before we can even go to the question, you can basically analyze on what you're given and see what is it that you have about the graph. For example, here, half cos x. So what does this mean to me? So this means now here I have the value of 1 over 2, right? And then I have the value of k is equal to 1 because you see here there is just 1x, so it means k is equal to 1, right? So if k is equal to 1, then it means I can see that the value for p here, the horizontal shift, it is 0 because there's no shifting. And then q is also 0 because there's no vertical shifting. And then from there, if you want to find the period, basically, so the period for this will then be 360 divided by 1, because remember, divide by the circles, k, and then basically your answer is going to be 360. So these are the things that you must also know in mind when you see the graphs, right? So the next one, g of x, which is sine x minus 30. So from this one, I can see that the value for a here is 1, right? And then I can see k is also 1. But then now look at p. P is equal to minus 30. So if the value is negative, all right, if you have your value of p is negative, what does it mean? So it means this graph is shifted to the right, all right? Okay, so so from here, what else do we still need to find? That is q is 0. Q is 0, and then I'll use period. So I'll say period. It is basically going to be 360, right? So because it's going to be 360 divided by 1, which is going to be 360. All right, so enough said. Let's go ahead now and look at the questions and see how we can answer these questions. So 7.1 says determine the length of AB. So where's AB? So there is AB. So now AB, if you're looking at AB, this is a vertical distance. So I'm going to put it as vertical distance. So the formula that you always use to calculate vertical distance, we use the word VD for vertical distance. So VD, it is basically the y value at the top minus the y value at the bottom, right? So now between these points, you can see that the first value at the top is 0.5. So this is going to be 0.5 minus, and then the one at the bottom, it is minus 0.5. Now notice that these signs are separated intentionally because they're not the same thing. So I'm just going to take out now the calculator and then see what that gives me. So 0.5 minus 0.5. So that gives me 1. So the vertical distance is 1 unit. And that's how we do this one. All right, so let's go ahead and look into the second question. Now the second question here, it says write down the range of this. Okay, now if you remember earlier, I already said something about the range. I said the range, if it is sine and cos, basically we use this formula. So it's going to be mean here and it's going to be the maximum here. All right, so now I need to find these values, right? Because if you remember, min means minus a plus q, so I must know what is a and q. And also here maximum, it means a plus q, same thing. I need to know a and q. So right, what I'm going to do firstly is basically simplify this now. So simplifying this will be basically 3, and then f of x, I know it is 1 over 2 cos x, and then I'll say plus 2, and then when I simplify this, this gives me 3 over 2 cos x plus 2. Now from this, you can see that here, this is the value for a, and that is the value for q. All right, so what does this mean? So this means now here we need to find our minimum. So the minimum here will then be minus a plus q. Remember, we said doesn't matter whether this is positive or negative, we always put it as negative, the certain value. So it's going to be negative 3 over 2 plus 2, right? And then you can go to your calculator, press that one out, and then you should get, let's see here, if I'm pressing this on a calculator, let me just put it there because I know it is 1 over 2, but just wanna make sure that everyone sees it. So it is 1 over 2, and then for the maximum it is going to be a plus q, and then it will be positive 3 over 2 plus 2, and then this one I have 7 over 2. But then again, you can basically test that by just looking at it like that. So maximum is 7 over 2, minimum it is 1 over 2, so therefore the range it is going to be 1 over 2 and 7 over 2. That's how we do it. All right, now 7.3 says read off from the graph a value of x for which g of x minus f of x is equals to root 3 over 2. All right, so now here basically what they want us to do is they want us to look on the graph or at the graph and see how can we achieve a difference which will give us this. All right, so now in order for us to do this, we must understand how do we actually even achieve this. Right now, because of here we have a couple of values here, because here I see that we have f of x, which is half cos x, right, and g of x, which is equals to sine x minus 30, right? Now the easy way to do this is for us to understand that what is it that we need to do, right, in order for us to get root 3 over 2. Okay, so now here they're saying that we need to find the x value where we take the difference to be 3 over 2. Now one of the ways to do this is basically by looking into the angles that we are given here, right? So firstly, you cannot see for sure what is happening, right? But then now what you can do here is basically look into the calculator and calculate the difference between these, right? So we're going to keep calculating the difference between these values that we are given. You notice that here I'm using the angles that we are given there. And the reason for that is because if we are using the angles there, then we are going to be able to find what is going to be happening, right? Because that's what the difference means. So the difference means that we're taking g of x and we're subtracting f of x. So these are the differences that we have here firstly, right? So I'm just going to put all of them there, but then now we want the one where g of x is at the top and f of x is at the bottom. And then from all these ones that I just calculated here, you can see that here f is at the top and g is at the bottom, but here g is at the top and f is at the bottom, which means the ones that we are looking for here are these ones. So to make your life easy now, what you're going to do is to find this this value of x. You just go to your calculator. So what are you doing to your calculator? You first type in your g of x. So g of x basically it is sine. So I'll put a bracket for x, then I'll say minus 30, and then I'll close bracket, and then minus, and then f of x it is half. Then I'll say cos, and then I'll just close the bracket like that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to substitute the first value there, 60, in both sides and see if the answer that we're going to get there is going to be square root over 2. See here we're getting 1 over 4, so it means 60 is not the one. So we're going to move on and see the second one. So the second one here is going to be 90, so I'm going to change this to 90, and then I'm also going to change that to 90. Let's see, we're getting root 3 over 2. So what does this mean? So it means here 90 is the one that we're going to be looking for, right? So I'm going to tick there. So now I need to test this even on other ones and see whether this is going to work or not. So from my understanding, this is 120. Let me just double check here. Yeah, that is 120. So if I substitute on 120, I want to see if am I gonna keep getting that value or not. So 120, see now, different. 150, change there to 150, see also different. 180, see also if I'm getting something there. 180, I see different. And last one, it is 210, because those are the difference that I see there. 210, and see here I'm getting root 3 over 4. As you can see here, the only value that gives me that it is what? It is going to be 90. So now x is going to be 90. So it means here we read this off using the graphs that we're given there. Now the last one, 7.4, says that for which values of x in the interval x is an element of minus 90 to 240 will f of x times g of x be greater than 0. Okay, so I want to do this because I don't want to cancel this. I want to do it on a clean sheet. Okay, so let's do it on a clean sheet or a clean slide. So again, the question says for which values of x in the interval minus 90 to 240 will f of x times g of x be greater than 0. Okay, so again, what does it mean to have f of x times g of x greater than 0? Now f of x, first of all, it means y values. So now here it means here we need to look for two y values, right? That one y value needs to come from f and another one needs to come from g, that when we multiply them the answer becomes positive, right? Becomes positive. So greater than 0 means positive. Now here the only way we can get this to be positive is if the y values are positive and also the y values of f are positive and the y values of g are also positive. Now another way is if the y values are negative and also the y values of g are also negative, that could also be positive. Now, where do we see values here that are basically positive? So here, if you're looking at this first part, right, before they intersect, right, you can see that here, this one, it is positive and this one, it is negative, right? So they continue to become positive and negative. The one at the top, well, the one at the bottom continues to become negative here, while this one becomes positive up until they get this point, up until they get into that point. So at that point, we can see the at 30, that's when now both of them are positive, like that. Now, where does this thing end? So it ends when f gets to 90, right? And then from there, what happens? So I'm just going to put a line there at 90. What happens? So now they still now do opposite directions. This other one, it is negative, while this other one, it is positive. So where does this thing end? So it ends there at 210. That is where g now starts to do what? Starts to come to the negative parts. Then now look, guess what happened after? They now both become negative. So which means now here we're looking for areas where they both what? Positive and both negative. Now you can see that the first area where this is happening when x is between 30 and 90. Now notice that I didn't say equals to because I do not include 30 and 90, because at 30 the other one is still at 0, but another one is just positive. So it means 0 times positive, it is 0, right? So that's the first one. And the second one, it is basically here. So remember, our interval ends at 240. So it means now I need to say between 210 and 240, this is where I still experience the same thing. So that is how we get our graph, right? So now I'm not gonna erase this because I want you to have this as part of your notes. So remember, these y values are positive and this one are positive. This one is positive while this one is negative. That's why it didn't work. This one is negative, that one is positive, and this one is negative and negative. That's why they worked. So now this next question, I'm just gonna explain it on the next slide so that you can understand how it works. So this one, we're looking for the values of x in the same interval where g prime x minus 5, right, it is greater than 0. All right. Now the first thing that you need to understand here is, firstly, we're looking at the value of g, right? Now the tricky thing that they did here is they shifted the value, or they shifted the graph to the right, by what? By 5 units. So what does this mean? So this means now whatever that I need to do here, in order for me to get the answer, the first thing that I must do is, because I'm going to be looking to the diagram, right? I must first look the x values where the original graph is greater than 0, right? So if the derivative is greater than 0, what does this mean? So it means this graph, it is increasing. So by increasing, it means it's going up. So now the question that I'm going to ask myself is, where is g going up, right? So now if I'm sketching g, you will then see firstly that here g was going down, and then after that, what happened? G started to go up, right, up until it got there. And then what happens after that? And then after that, G started going down, right? So now it means now my area of focus, it is where G started to go up and where it ended going up, right? So that's where my focus is at. Now, by the looks of this, you can see that G did that when x was between minus 60 and 120. That's when the graph of g was going up, right? Because remember, derivative greater than 0 means going up. Then now from there, these points were then shifted to the right by 5 units. So if you now say that this was shifted 5 units, so let me just write it here, shifted 5 units, right? Now what this then means is that now everything that you see here, this and that, was basically shifted to the right. So when we shift this to the right, what happens? So basically what happens is that, remember, we have our original one, which is minus 60 and 120. Then now when we shift it to the right, it means we're adding by 5 here because we're going to the right. So it means now here, I'll take this and add that shift. So I'll say plus 5, and also here I'll say plus 5, and then now this will give me the x value, which is going to be minus 55 and 125 of the x values where the shifted derivative basically has this graph increasing. And that is basically all for this. Now I picked this one because I just wanted to make sure that I explain especially these two parts, and also to get to the part of the range and to explain how to easily do this when you're basically reading off the value for that, and also of course to share a couple of notes. And that's it for this video. I hope I hope Patrice managed to take some notes on this one, or maybe there is something that you learned. And then then again guys, if there's anything that you would like for me to share, or if maybe Patrice has a specific video that you would like me to do, please by all means comment on this one, share the paper, share the year where you basically got the trig function and you felt like you're struggling with that, and then that's when I'm going to basically respond and actually focus on that one. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much. Please don't forget to share this to your friends, and also don't forget to subscribe and switch on the notification bell so that when another video gets uploaded, you can basically be notified. All right, I'm going to see you on to the next one. Cheers.